Welcome to another episode of Health Matters with PA Lynn Zabo. What are we going to talk about today, Lynn?
We're going to talk about what happens to bodies after they die, and specifically what burial options there are out there. Because I thought this was kind of a reasonable topic. Because recently the state of California has okayed human composting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which has other names like natural organic reduction. Um, and it's
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing in the Pacific Northwest. And I remember reading about that law, which is going to take effect at the end of January in 2027. And I thought people should know about this. A lot of people know about cremation, and we'll address that. But there's also worldwide some other options that I suppose people could access if they wanted to. But and then I think actually there's enough information that we could talk next week about what embalming is and maybe some other choices.
Absolutely. These are things that we talk, right? Polite society, we don't talk about death. We don't talk about grief. We don't talk about the options. And then when it happens, right, we're in a position where we have to make decisions as a family with a loved one and for a loved one.
Suddenly, when we're grieving, and
right,
it kind
we're
of
going to
comes out
spend
of nowhere.
$1,200 on a tiny little pillow for a dead person. Then we're going to fight over how we're going to pay for the funeral. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up. Thank you for thinking of it.
So, but I first want to talk about what's called human composting, and then AKA natural organic reduction. And this is where microbes and organic material convert a deceased body into compost. Okay, so what it looks like at the end is essentially mulch with bones in it, and then
like big pieces of bone, or I guess it's not like cremation; it's just your skeletal remains.
Right, but those are processed. So it kind of came into a topic of interest and on my radar in studies by a woman named Katrina Spade, who was working out of the University of Washington in 2020. So this, in a way, it's ancient, and in a way, it's new.
Right.
Recently legalized in California, kind of a big deal in the West in general, but especially the Pacific Northwest. So it's legal in Washington, legal in Oregon. And it's a way of recycling that really only involves carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and water to work. So it's kind of gentle on the environment, at least as far as I could see. The body is placed in a container, and it's probably dressed in, if it's dressed at all, in biodegradable clothing and also wrapped with a biodegradable shroud. Okay. And then
so it's like some form of dignity.
You're right. And then in the container, there's composting elements like wood chips, straw, alfalfa, and wildflowers are scattered. I kind of like that. That sounds like a Neanderthal person might have been buried. It's not wildflower seeds. It's the flowers are inside. Medical equipment is removed from the body before it's placed in the container. The container it's kind of a elongated oval container that is a little roomier than a coffin, but they're kind of stacked on special shelves in either a warehouse designed for that or an outside facility. Mostly the chambers I've seen are stored in like a warehouse facility, and it's all very respectful and beautiful, and it has a little meditative area and a chapel-like area.
Yeah, I think I saw something about that on 2020 several years ago.
Yeah. It takes about a month or two to break down, and the flesh of the body breaks down into 1 to 2 cubic yards of soil.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah. Bones are removed from that because the bones don't break down that quickly, and they're pulverized. So somebody has that job, which I think is weird.
Like, how do they pulverize them? Do they not discuss how that's done?
Yeah, they're put in a special pulverizing unit, and they're actually pulverized within 20 seconds. So
and then added back into that.
Yeah, and then they're mixed back with the rest of the remains.
Into the compost. So basically you have compost that's high in calcium and phosphorus now.
Could be, yeah. And then, of course, nobody is buried with something, say, like a wedding ring or a memento that isn't going to break down. Okay.
Wait, so they're not buried, though. They're composted. So what happens to the compost after that?
Yeah, they're not. So what happens is the soil is either returned to the family.
Which is that's like a truckload of compost.
Right. And that's exactly what they do. They showed it kind of pitched into the back end of a pickup truck, but I imagine it's closed and it's not like you're scattered on the highway on a high five on the way down from, Oregon. Or they have actually a connection. The organization that I've bought into has a connection with an kind of a conservation area, and they're doing soil enrichment. And I think what they're doing is they're kind of rehabbing an old logging site.
Okay, so I'm sorry. When you say you bought into, like, this is what you want. Like, this is your idea?
Actually,
you've bought into it?
my idea is that my children are going to bring up a pickup truck and load me into the back and then scatter me in the redwoods. But knowing my children, I think I'm going to end up in a conservation area because that's the default setting.
Gotcha. So you want to be spread out because that's like moving. I mean, I don't know how much it weighs. I'm thinking like a ton, like a literal ton.
It's about a ton, yeah.
I can't imagine having to find a truck that's going to pull the ton of compost and then having to shovel out a ton of compost of my dead mom.
Yeah,
I can see your children being like, "Nah, love you, Mom, but no."
Yeah, thanks, but no.
That's a big ask, Lynn.
Yeah, I know.
Is that dirt underneath your fingernails? No, that's my mom.
I'm carrying her everywhere. I'll never show her again. Anyway, and I'd be okay with that, although I kind of want to be in California. It's been essentially my lifelong home, but I'd be okay with Washington too. But if they put me in Texas, I'm going to have issues. But anyway.
No Texas, bring you to California. I'll see if I can help them out.
Right. The soil is either returned to the family or donated to the conservation effort, but some people cannot. They can't qualify for this. Like they have an infectious disease like tuberculosis or Ebola, or actually Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
That's like mad cow for people.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would so that disease doesn't dissipate in the composting process or in the soil and dirt?
Tuberculosis would be spores. Jakob,
so you're would be including those tuberculosis spores into the soil.
Let's just say the organisms are resistant in the environment and they don't break down.
That would make sense.
Right. And also, this soil is not used to grow food. Although I suppose if my kids were inspired and brought me down, they could grow me in their household garden. I don't know. I like the idea.
I'd put you in my garden, Lynn.
You.
I didn't say I would grow my food in my garden with you, but I would plant some flowers for you.
Yeah, sure.
In your remains.
And unfortunately, some religions, and I'm not going into the religious details of any of this, but some religions don't support this at all. They think it's disrespectful to the body to allow it to rot. And, that's okay. Everybody can be where they are on that.
Absolutely.
So the second thing is cremation. And this is pretty common. I think a lot of people know about this. This is the disposal of bodies by fire. It's in use worldwide in different forms. It's, of course, been used in abhorrent conditions historically, if we think about the concentration camps of Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But in the U.S., what happens is it happens in a closed furnace at a crematorium with a body being placed in a cardboard box or a wooden shell that looks like a coffin. So they don't necessarily burn up elaborate coffins. And
no.
We actually have a crematorium here in town associated with a local funeral home.
Is it here, or is it they send your body someplace else for that?
I was told it was local. Yeah, so anyway, jewelry and medical devices are removed. For example, I thought this was interesting. Pacemakers are removed because they explode. So they got to take them out, and that nobody wants their wedding ring to be melted down. So it leaves about 5 pounds of ashes, and this also includes bone fragments, which are pulverized. I think that's kind of interesting that somebody has that job.
Yeah, I would say so. My parents were cremated, and I have their remains. And then I had family members who wanted some of their remains, and so having to sort that through.
Right.
There's still bone fragments in there, like so you have to go and
very,
get the
very small.
yeah. But I mean, they're very clearly pieces of human bone
Right.
that are discolored, but pieces of human bone.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what your definition of pulverized is, but they're not powdered just like
No,
the
they're
ashes
not.
are.
They're not powdered, but it's not like there's a whole femur. You
No,
know?
yeah.
So they take that down and they break it down a little farther.
Yeah.
So, and the cremains are made up of carbon, phosphate, sodium, potassium, and probably trace elements. And that actually kind of highlights one of the problems with cremation is that the mercury in fillings gets aerosolized and released into the atmosphere.
Wouldn't they take that out prior to cremation?
I don't think they do. I think,
It's on the list of the things they ask.
yeah, I would. It probably depends on what the local laws are, state laws. But I also think that it might be less of a problem because I think mercury in general is not like a super great thing to use for fillings, and people are kind of moving away from it.
Well, yeah, but I
anyway.
mean, for older people that we cremate.
Right. And then in Asian countries, this was kind of interesting. The bones are picked out by a family in a special ceremony. They have like these elongated chopsticks.
Out of the cremated remains?
Yeah. And so the cremains are delivered to the family. The family has a ceremony, and they use chopsticks to kind of separate the bones.
Okay.
And then the bones are placed in an ossuary, I think. An
okay.
ossuary is just a collection point for bones.
Okay.
So they're separated out. I'm not sure why that is, actually.
I don't know.
Except
either.
it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
But again, right, they're not the size of a femur or even a full finger. They're just fragments of.
They look like fragments. So cremation is cheaper and less toxic than traditional burial, but it still uses fuel and it puts out a lot of carbon as well as the mercury into the atmosphere.
What fuel? Do you know what fuel is used to? I mean, because that's a huge heat, and I think it takes quite a long time. So I know there's a lot of energy that's used.
I think it's either natural gas or propane, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, they put the corpse into, let's say a cardboard box. It's a corrugated cardboard box, and it's kind of loaded up like you would go into a CT scan, which is kind of creepy. But and it's put in a chamber that's again, it's round and elongated like a cylinder, and then they they have, I think there's a window for viewing, but they don't. In some religions, it's important for the relatives to see the body go into the burning chamber, but not necessarily watch the process.
Well, that would make sense because there's that question of, because I asked it, and I was grown when my father was cremated, and asked like how do we know we're getting my father back and not other people too, and they're getting pieces of my father you didn't clean out, and they were really open about explaining that process.
What did they tell you? Just curious.
Up at Hole in Hole, they said what you said, that they're in their own container, that it's cleaned out after each one. All of the remains are gathered up and given to the family. They're sealed inside of the plastic bag that goes inside of the urn. That there's requirements in state laws and all kinds of other things, and so it's only one person done at a time. So it's not like they have a chamber where they're putting in multiple people and then trying to sort that out later. And so that's how they know that you're getting back just your loved one.
You're probably, on a molecular level, you're probably getting somebody else's molecules too, mixed in on a really tiny level.
Oh, yeah.
But not,
but I don't think I have half of somebody else's, and it's not the same as if they put
in a
two
minuscule,
in this space.
on a minuscule level. And the same thing is that, your loved one's molecules are probably going home with the next person who's in the crematorium to a tiny degree.
Right, but that's the same way as saying if you cough in the space that I'm in, I'm breathing in your DNA.
Right.
We're talking closely together.
Totally.
So we're all sharing that molecular level of stuff anyway.
Totally.
So that's how we're all connected.
Yeah. So, yeah, I find that actually the continuity of that kind of comforting in a weird way. But anyway,
it's a weird topic to talk about.
Yeah, it's a weird topic, especially when, you've just had or recently in the last couple of years had the experience of cremating a parent, and I have had that too. And I actually...
Both my parents.
Oh, both. I'm so sorry. But my mother's cremains were split by my sister, who actually had this need for me to take some up to the redwoods, and because she loved going up into the redwood forest here and would visit, pretty regularly. And even though she didn't really want that, she wanted her cremains to go back to the family burial plot in Ohio. My sister had other ideas. So I hope deceased people, when they see what actually, assuming that they see what actually goes on with their body, I think they're pretty disconnected from it. But
yeah, that's what my dad said. So my mom's Mormon, and I asked my dad as he knew he was passing away within less than a month of when he passed. Like, Mom's going to want to do your temple work and have you sealed. And he just laughed, and he's like, I'm going to be dead. I don't care what you do with my body. I genuinely don't care what you do with this. And so it was weird just to hear him say that. But I think you're right. I genuinely believe that your energy doesn't die. So we are energy. You go on, and that's eternal life. But I don't think we have a connection or care with what happens to our bodies afterwards.
No, I don't think so. But some religions are not supportive.
That's true.
And they have like degrees of support. So they're okay as long as the remains are buried on consecrated ground. And that would be the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
People's different religions around the world really struggle with this. That was one thing I noticed in my reading up on it. So.
Yeah, I think it's genuinely a personal decision, and support the decisions that people make for themselves, whether you want to be in Washington, you desire to be in California, to have your physical form stay here, because it's where you've spent your life.
Yeah, I'm kind of bonded to Del Norte.
Yeah, maybe we can just bag you up like bag compost, put you in a truck, and then just slowly dump you in the redwoods where nobody's looking.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what
that's my hope. But the realism is that my children aren't going to do that. And I think anybody, when they die, do they really have any control?
So I'm going to have to rent a truck and go pick you up in bags and bring you back?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll do it for you, Lynn.
So
maybe I'll get smushed first. You never know.
I know. And then I actually struggle with my pets being with me. So, and they don't do this for pets. You can't have a dog with you. The next thing I want to talk about is sky burial, which is also called celestial burials. And this is something that is not in our culture.
You mean like the American or the Western cultural societies?
Yeah, this is not. But this is where the body is placed on a mountaintop to decompose or eaten by scavenging animals such as crows, vultures, bears, and jackals. So it gets real
part
from
of
here.
Decomposing.
Yeah. I imagine that at least Hollywood tells us that some Native Americans kind of did this. But it's never really been a thing here.
Here is in Western society.
Yeah.
Okay.
Common in Tibet, parts of China, Nepal, and India. And what they believe is kind of what we've been saying, that after death, the body becomes inconsequential. So it's just not relevant to the person anymore. And although they're successful to a point in doing that, they're not completely successful. But Tibetans in particular call it giving alms to the birds. That's what they call sky burials. I thought that was super poetic. Or they call to carry to the mountain, and that means a sky burial.
Okay.
Yeah. So it can be very straightforward, like just placing the naked body on a flat rock, or the body can be disassembled by a monk. So there's special monks who kind of do this.
Oh, that
And
just gross.
Yeah, that weird jobs that people have.
Disassembled, that just does not sound. I guess it's to be the same as working in a funeral home, though, and I shouldn't say that's gross because, right, they have to remove artificial limbs and whatever.
Right.
Pacemakers. That means you have to go back into the heart and remove that.
Right. We're gonna talk actually about embalming, and we can get into those details next week. But bones are broken or ground, and then they mix the ground bones with flour, barley flour, or milk, and it's fed again to the scavengers. So every single part of their body is used. Now, even though they think the body becomes inconsequential after death, then this is not witnessed by the family. Okay, they do have special meeting places where this happens, but the family is at a distance away, and it's not really up in their face. So I still think there's some emotional attachment. I don't think it's 100%.
Right? It's a grief ceremony. These people do these things, and these people, yeah.
But there's kind of a balance between it, because if the vultures reject the body, or there's just not enough scavengers around to eventually eat it. Of course, this happens over time. This is interpreted that the deceased had some personal defect, and they were rejected by the scavengers. So they're not completely successful of emotionally separating from the body, which I thought was kind of interesting. It probably changes from culture to culture, though.
But that kind of makes sense. So again, I said that my mom was Mormon, and so she asked me to dress her in her temple clothes and her spiritual beliefs and to honor those things, and so I did.
Right.
I went with her best friend Rachel, and we dressed her, and it was the weirdest. Right, the cold, the way she wasn't warm, she wasn't snuggly, it was just, and her
it's
friend,
a different texture of the skin. The skin feels after death more like neoprene, like a dive suit.
Right, it's completely weird. It was the first time I had experienced somebody who had been dead for that long to touch and to do, and then the cold from being refrigerated. And after it was done, her friend and I were standing there, and Rachel was just like, "Would you like a moment alone with her?" And I looked at her, and I wasn't trying to be like, I'm tough and I can do these things. I'm like, that's not her. That's just the house she lived in, and turned around and walked away. But I still have the emotional connection of that was my mom, and to feel her differently for the last time. I don't know. So it does make sense that you still have some connection with the body, but you able to disconnect and understand that that's just the house that she lived in.
Yeah, actually, this process of the sky variable, when they're disarticulating the body and preparing it for the scavengers, the process is very lighthearted and jovial. So the people who are actually carrying this out, they're joking and laughing and, hey, did you catch that soccer game? And they're not, it's not a solemn, and this is probably not 100%, but in general, there's a lightness to it, and kind of a rising above the sadness of what we see in America. Northern America is actually a very sad occasion.
Yeah, my dad said he didn't want to have a funeral; he wanted to have a funeral, and we had to do the hokey pokey, and so we did. I had to lead the hokey pokey at my dad's service. Yay!
I know the things that our parents ask of us, but anyway.
But it was fun, and my dad was he was just a character. So
I think that's awesome. So this is also, at least for the Tibetans, it's not really seen as the scavengers are carrying the soul to the heavens, because I've read that before, but the more scholarly information I got about it is the vultures are not ascending with bits of people to bring them to heaven, because they really believe that the soul has already independently gone on to wherever.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and so I thought that was really interesting, especially not connected, but especially because we now have some large scavengers here. Obviously, in Tibet, the vultures are different species than what we have here. But the condor's back, and they're a well-known scavenger, and I'm not suggesting they're eating bodies if they're human bodies, not at all.
No, they're focused on an egg.
Right, exactly. A lot of excitement there. But, one wonders sometimes, I'm by nature a curious woman. My mind goes to weird places. So.
Right, a curiosity is an amazing thing to have. So many people aren't curious anymore, but it is. Everybody gets to have their own belief and their own understanding, and far be it from me to, if somebody is coping in their grief their way, for me to say that that's wrong in any way. So if I gave that impression to anybody through this conversation, then that's
totally.
It was not intended, and I apologize.
And if we've triggered anybody's grief, I'm really, really sorry. Maybe we should have had a trigger warning in the beginning. But I find this all really interesting. We don't talk about this, and especially with the composting thing. So I'm buying into composting, guys, if that's relevant. And I think people should know that it's an option. Next week, I wanted to kind of continue along this theme and talk about things like burial at sea and a burial within trees, and maybe the traditional Northern Americanized business of embalming people and what that really entails and what that's like, and talk about this kind of more on. I don't know, closer to home and also farther away from home. Tree burials, I guess, happen in Africa. But there's probably burials actually kind of in like Malaysia and that are kind of cliff burials. I mean, there's just a lot of variation on how people
deal with death.
Yeah, deal with death, and then take care of a sanitation problem, and then usher their loved ones on to their next stop, I guess.
Yeah, because we have grief, and then we have our spiritual beliefs, and we have our religious beliefs, and then we have the person who's passed away and honoring those. So it's a complicated thing. And then you have, like, what your sister wanted was not what your mom wanted, and then what she asked you to do. So, yeah, it would, maybe after next week when we talk and we have our things too, we can talk with Reverend Gill and Chaplain Curry, so Dana and Ben, and talk about grief. I've talked about that with them before, so we can get a new podcast going to talk about those things.
That I think would be great.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not just death that we grieve: the loss of a job, the loss of a marriage, moving. There's all kinds of different forms of grief.
The loss of a way of life and activity. Like, I talked to a woman who's grieving her husband, and this also happened in the Castro a lot, is that you have all this activity around somebody who's actively dying, and then it stops.
Yeah.
So there's definitely food for thought there.
Yeah, and when you're a long-term caregiver too, and especially it's been years or decades that you've been caring for somebody, and then they've passed away, you have completely lost, because you
kind of lost your focus.
Not even just your focus, but you've gotten to know the nurse navigators and the people who are helping you with the things, and seeing the people regularly at the pharmacy for new medications, and the different doctors and specialists in your routine, and the whole your way of life has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like being a parent when your child leaves and you have that empty nest. You're like, well, what do I do? Who am I now?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that when my brother passed, we're 13 months apart in age, and I don't have a single memory of the whole of my life where he wasn't there by my side. And to figure out who I was without him, and learning who I am without him, and then being able to say that out loud. It doesn't mean I didn't have an identity. I was just his sister. It just means that I don't know my life without him there, and learning what that looks like. And that's a process.
Yeah, it's like turning to another puzzle piece to complete who you are.
Yeah. It's right. Everything's changed. I don't know. Everything has changed. I never imagined I would ever live a day of my life without my bestest best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's kind of funny to know, too, that all my deepest, darkest secrets have died with somebody. Not in a funny ha-ha way, but in an odd way of, oh, hey, he knew everything and he's not here anymore. If I don't tell you, you'll never know.
What can you get away with?
Right? I do have 2 older siblings that know a lot of it as well, but he
Okay.
knew everything.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much, Lynn. This was very interesting. I'm glad we're going to talk about this next week, and we'll see what we can launch from there. And then again, too, like when this goes up on YouTube and the podcasting platforms, I think this would be an interesting discussion to have in the comments. So I'll make sure that we follow along with that and participate and help people connect to the resources that they need if they've got questions, or if there's questions that they have for you or for putting together a grief podcast. Thank you so much, Lynn. I'll see you next week.
Bye.